Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. We appreciate you joining us. Seth Cressman is not here today, but I'm Ben Brayshaw, and joined here once again with Dan Michelon. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good, Ben. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm fairly excited for this show because I think this makes the best of the best of the best of our clients and our listeners. I think the information that we're going to be talking about today is really drives the soul of who you are and what your story is in life. I really like the fact that how we give, where we give, and what we give really defines a lot of the heart and the person we are. And giving your best, which is our title today, is really at the heart of a practice. I mean, we work with a lot of nonprofits, we work with a lot of Christian organizations, and help managing money and doing a lot of those things and helping people build charitable programs and ways to give that are both philanthropic but beneficial to them in the giver's most advantageous financial manner. And that makes us excited. I mean, we do that a lot. We speak about that. We visit with organizations about that. And I think today we're going to talk with people, and we've done shows like this. We've talked about charitable giving. We've talked about all sorts of different ways to manage your giving and taxes. And today we're going to review some of those, come up with some new ones. And then also we're going to talk about the things that you should beware of. And I think that could just be almost as important, if not more important, for our listeners. And if you're just joining us for the first time today, you can reach us at 855-226-8551. Dan and myself and Seth, we're both partners and planners at Brayshaw Financial Group. And we're really hoping that you find success in your investing. I mean, that is our goal here today. You can also email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. That's where you can send us, show ideas, questions about things. Feel free to reach out. We really encourage our listeners to do that. We really want to help you find the best in yourself and help you find success. And that's our hope. Right, Dan?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think, particularly this giving topic, for people who are inclined to give, there's almost a shame or a guilt in how you manage the other end of that. How do you benefit from doing so? And there really shouldn't be. This will put you in a position to give more and to make sure that you're doing it as efficiently and effectively as you can from your perspective as well. So a really exciting topic. I'm happy about the show.
Yeah, no, me too. But before we jump into that show, we have for you Money in the News.
Coming to us first from Yahoo Finance, this is written by Shannon Thaler. Cruise prices surged 43% amid post-pandemic travel boom. So this is, I found interesting on a couple levels. And, really whenever I think of investing through the pandemic and, that lens that we all seem to have on everything in our recent past, the cruise story was one of those really up and down and really wild times. The cruise ships obviously were restricted from leaving port in a lot of places and had this reputation for being these super spreader events. So, obviously the stocks suffered through that. There's a lot of people who were, stuck at home and looking for things to do, ways to make money, and day trading once again became all the rage. And playing cruise ships was a big part of that. So, I've been on a number of cruises. I enjoy them. I do think it's a great way to travel and vacation, but that whole notion of watching these stock prices go up and down and kind of riding them all over the place through that period of time, it just always stuck with me. So to see them rebounding and doing well and flourishing as businesses, I think is fantastic. And this article points out a couple of interesting things that they've done to kind of reinvent themselves in this time and to attract more visitors. But this 43% uptick in cost that a lot of people are realizing is, I think, good news for the cruise industry, not necessarily great for all the travelers out there, but there are certainly still deals to be had. And I still think it's a great way to travel for people who are, not looking to deal with the, ever expanding cost of flights and hotels everywhere else.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting article, and from an investment standpoint, we've seen cruise lines skyrocket, and then, they pulled back a little bit, especially with this market, kind of adjustment that's going on. But it was interesting, Dan, as we were talking about that, even though the rising cost of oil has, been clearly a quote unquote headwind, as noted by the article, it's not really the driving. They're saying that's just only part of it. Just the overall cost has been massive, and that they've been spending money on, building ports in places where they believe that, people want to go. And I think these ports are not cheap. I mean, Dan, $500 million to build a port. It's just an insane amount of money. Do I think it's in the millions? Yeah, but $500 million, that's $500 million. I mean, we're talking cement, dredging, I get it's big infrastructure, but I would have thought it was like 50, maybe 100 million. I mean, to 5 times, 10 times my kind of guesstimate, I thought was pretty shocking for me. I guess, maybe I'm just a novice when it comes to building, ports, but it's pretty incredible that these things cost as much. But they're saying that the sheer demand of cruising has just risen at a level so fast that that's actually, between the infrastructure and the demand, is really what's driving the cost. It's not necessarily this, headwind of oil prices. And we've spoken about this a lot on the show. I mean, we've really, hammered home over and over and over again. And just the fact that, the demographic shift in this country is so overwhelming. Where the money's going to be spent is really important for when you're actually looking at an investment. And with, 40 some odd million Americans retired, that's a lot of Americans. It's like 15% of Americans retired. And in the next 20 years, another 80 million Americans are going to retire. That's 120 million Americans out of 320 million Americans that are retired over the next couple of years. And over the next 20 years. And that is a huge demand on vacation and travel and airfare and cruises, which doesn't surprise me. I'm just kind of a little shocked, Dan, that the demand's so high. I think some of this is post-COVID, but I also think it's, hey, I've done all my vacationing in America. Let me, spread my wings a little bit and hop on a cruise. What do you think?
Well, there's a couple of, I think, really good points from the, considering the investment perspective on this. So the article says that only 30% of Americans have ever cruised. So 70% of the American consumer base has never been on a cruise. And even with these increased costs coming out of the pandemic lows, obviously when they had to entice people through any means possible to get them back on board these ships, they still market it as a 70% savings of your overall vacation costs when you look at, the air travel and the lodging and all that. So they're still selling it as a discount vacation to a wide audience of people who have never taken them up on this, have never boarded a cruise ship. And I obviously personally haven't cruised in a long time, but when I did, I felt that was the case. I really did think it was kind of a cheaper way to go. As long as you don't get seasick, I thought it was fantastic, right? That's not an issue for me. But this whole notion that you mentioned, Ben, about them building the ports, I think that's the real gold in this thing, is that they've, to save on fuel costs, they're taking shorter trips to places that they are building, right? So, and I think this is, and I don't want to give credit where it's not due, but I remember Disney coming out with that, right? There's a Disney cruise going to a Disney island, and all these other cruise ships and cruise companies have started to mimic that same thing, where they can control their fuel costs rather, and continue to profit from people when they disembark the boat. I think that's the revenue that they lost when you're jumping from port to port throughout the Caribbean. As soon as people leave the cruise ship, they go spend money elsewhere. Right, so they're not at the casino, they're not at the onboard restaurants. But if you're taking them to a port that you own and you're building all of the entertainment and the beachside cabanas, the restaurants, all that stuff is all part of the cruise line itself. They're kind of containing that revenue within their own structure. So they've taken on a significant amount of debt, you're right, in order to build these destinations. But I believe long term, that's going to be a profit for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is, very strategic. I mean, they just have, money making everywhere, but I think they're just kind of closing the gap between, your airfare, your hotel stay, your Airbnb. They're trying to bring that, if they're 70 or 80% or 60% of that number, bringing that closer, but not 100. And I think that's room for profit. I think it's pretty incredible that 70% of U.S. or Americans have never cruised before. I mean, I've only done one, Dan, as you know, and it was great. I mean, I had a wonderful time. I'm not sure that I wasn't a cruise person. So But it was a wonderful time. I probably wouldn't say no again, but it's not the thing I'm looking for. But I was shocked that 70% of Americans have never cruised before, because it's a household conversation, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed them. It's just been a while, but especially with the young family that I have, I think it's a great idea because everything's kind of contained. There's only so far you can go, right? And I do think there's a lot of cost savings built into that kind of one-stop shop. You don't need the hotel, you don't need the rental car. The food's basically built in and accounted for. And a lot of these cruise lines, at least back when I was doing it, they will pick up the airfare to get you to the closest disembarkment point. So, overall, I think it's a good way to go.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Next up here, we have Exxon to buy Pioneer for $60 billion, as in boy, dollars, to dominate the shale oil. I'm sure Seth is disappointed not being on the show for this article today. But he's not with us this week, unfortunately. He had some stuff come up, but Seth's wheelhouse is oil. He loves the conversation with me. We talk about this stuff, the three of us, all the time. I think energy is a huge component of the future. It's a conversation everywhere. Our demand for energy continues to rise. I read this article, Dan, and it just feels like Exxon is just cornering the market on U.S. domestic oil on some level. Between them and Occidental Petroleum, I'm a little scared on big oil becoming bigger. But Exxon agreed to buy Pioneer Natural Resources for $59.5 billion and become the largest takeover in more than 2 decades to become the dominant producer of shale oil. And shale oil is not the easiest way to sometimes get oil, but it's become knowledgeable that it's a quicker on-demand process for demand for oil. So, for instance, the article goes into the conversation around these big rigs that are out in the ocean. They build these huge things and they got to keep producing the oil to pay for the infrastructure there. But with the shale oil and the Permian Basin through Texas and New Mexico, they're able to almost push oil on demand. So they can actually adjust the barrel production at a much lower cost that way. And the fear in the past was that these oil areas, the Permian Basin specifically, may dry up quicker than they thought, but that has proved not to be the case. And so now these big oil companies are really getting involved in this stuff. We talk about the price of oil and the price per barrel. It's $80, $100. These companies, it used to be low, like 30, 35, 40, but that's actually the break-even point for a lot of these oil companies, $30 to $40 a barrel oil. And it actually speaks to that in this article, saying, hey, they're acquiring assets that break even at $35 a barrel, and the current price here is great. So Kevin Cowrie and David Weth, they did a great job in this article. I thought they covered it well. Dan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that break-even point at 35 I thought was astonishing, quite honestly, considering where the price of oil is today. This has got a tremendous forward-looking potential for them. But it was also one of those kind of feel-old moments for me. Can you believe the ExxonMobil merger happened in 1999? That was almost 25 years ago. I still remember that. That's when I read this, I was like, "Oh, that just happened." And it's, geez, 25 years ago. That's incredible.
I know. It's a little bit overwhelming, and we think of it. It's ExxonMobil. It's that's the name. It's just kind of interesting that people have kind of drifted back to the Exxon conversation of that being its name, but. We all think about it, and you're right. Like, it's just yesterday. And these big, huge conglomerates, they do concern me. But from an investment standpoint, domestic oil, it's getting tighter out there. And I think there's some perspective on, how you feel oil is going to fly from an investment perspective. This is a good or a bad investment. And that's, that drives a lot of conversation. I thought it was interesting that Citigroup was involved in the management and as the financial advisor in this whole process. So
there is still a little bit of regulatory concern out there. It looks like the Biden administration may press a monopoly claim here. There was kind of a footnote towards the end of the article, so keep an eye on that. But I don't see that being successful, quite honestly. I think with the demand for energy where we're at, oil prices where we're at, and kind of domestic production issues being a relative hot topic these days, with OPEC kind of restraining us and creating the issues that they do, having this domestic super producer is only good news.
I agree.
All right, up next is adjustable rate mortgage demand spiked last week. Here's why. This comes to us from Diana Olick. And I thought this was interesting as well, from the sense, obviously everyone knows mortgage rates have gone up and continue to do so. For me, I was always a fixed rate guy, right? As soon as you can get into that fixed rate at a reasonable one, you go for it, right? And eliminate the risk of an adjustable mortgage. But this article is pointing to the fact that those have become more and more popular, and in particular lately, as there's been some lightening of the inversion in the yield curve. So what it'll say here, specifically 30-year fixed-rate mortgages for $726,000 or less increased last week from 7.67 to 7.67 from 7.53, but at the same time, a 5-in-1 ARM decreased from 6.49 to 6.33%. So reasonable deal there, I think, for people who are willing to bank on the fact that, at least 5 years out from now, that rates will be lower than where they stand today, which I'd agree with.
Yeah, I would hope that's the case. I mean, I think there's some potential truth to that. But I also feel like the Fed are a bunch of liars. So, every time we turn around, it's, we're not going to raise, or we're going to pause, or we're going to do this. And then you turn around and they actually do raise. They don't pause. I really think, Dan, we actually have 2 to 4 more rate hikes next year. I think they'll raise and raise and raise. And then I think we'll see like either a pause or a let up or even a reduction in rates right before the election. I think, they're going to try to ease the economy a little bit. But I just don't have a good feeling about the Fed. I don't think they're really transparent. But I also feel if I was in their shoes, I don't know how transparent I would want to necessarily be, because most people can't handle a tough conversation about what the economy looks like and what they feel like they need to do. So, it's easier to do a little bloodletting here and do a little bloodletting there and just not tell them that you're going to bleed them dry, So that's kind of my thinking on the overall rate conversation. So I think it's concerning that way. I'm concerned for people buying bonds. I'm concerned for people who are buying, 5-year CDs and things like that. I think you're going to find yourself kind of rate trapped at some point where you're going to say, hey, I don't want to sell my bond and lose money to go buy another bond that's a higher rate. So there's a conversation to be had around rates, I think a lot. But I do think I agree with you. The 5 years probably a fair bet. I prefer, if I was purchasing an ARM, I'd look for a 7, but, it's going to be a little bit higher there. So, I think that gives you a little bit more bandwidth to lock it in. But man, 7.67% for a 30-year fixed, that's incredible. We're talking conforming loan, like a normal, like you're an average home buyer, you're putting 20% down, you've been saving, and we're willing to lend you 7.6% rate. That's almost hard to swallow. That's higher. I don't know what the first time home buyer rates are. There should be better than this, but that's incredible. That's like rates from the 90s.
So happy I refinanced a couple of years ago. I feel that was an absolute windfall, just having gone through the process of doing that, because we're locked in at almost a quarter of what these new money rates are, that's just going to be really expensive to be in the home buyer market right now. Really expensive. Yeah.
No, I know. We've talked to people all the time. I remember one person we had chatted with, they were doing an interest-only adjustable rate mortgage. And I was like, you either need to sell that house and buy something you can afford, or you need to get yourself into 30-year fixed. And that was like 5-6 years ago, 7 years ago. And that was probably the wisest decision they ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, being at the whims of this spark rate environment would be not a comfortable place. Not at all.
Well, that's going to do it for us with Money in the News. Thank you for joining us for that. We're going to be right back to talk to you about giving your best. And we're going to talk about how to really maximize your taxes through your giving, through strategies and planning that you already are probably doing. And if you have questions on anything, you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. This show is going to be a life changer for you. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Seth Cressman with Brayshaw Financial Group. Are you looking for professional guidance to kickstart your investing journey? Look no further. Brayshaw Financial Advisors, we're here to help you. Our team of experts will provide professional, personalized advice tailored to your financial goals. Visit BrayshawFinancial.com today and schedule your free consultation. Looking forward to seeing you there.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Yeah, Seth Cressman's not with us today, and unfortunately we don't have his amazing radio voice, but it has definitely been a little quieter, a little more pleasant, I would say. Dan, what do you think?
I agree with that. It's going a little smoother.
Yeah.
He does have those silky chords, but,
Silky chords. He has a great voice. I'm coming over a cold, so, I feel bad doing the announcing today, but it's always good to be, here on Tap with you guys today as you're listening. Today, we're talking about giving your best. A lot of this is charitable giving, but a lot of it's about tax planning and really understanding taxes because Americans are just givers. I mean, we give, whether it's to a local charity, our time, to world events. Literally, we're the wealthiest nation in the world, and our country just gives and gives and gives. And I would say that I am honestly floored by some of the people I meet and the amount of giving that they do. It's humbling. And I think if you're a listener here today, what we want to do is we want to help you do two things. One is we want to help you give it in a way that is the most financially advantageous as possible. And you might be working with a CPA, and CPAs are wonderful, but most of us sit down with them somewhere around April. And when you're sitting down with them in April, it's either too late to do it in a better way, or they really just are too busy to give you any advice. So we really want to help you finish the year out strong. We want you to be able to really do the best you can do, giving your best and giving it in the best way. And that's our goal today. But we also want to help you watch out and beware of, kind of the giving faux pas that people get caught by, whether they're just completely scammed or if they're just doing it wrong and not understanding it entirely. And so, as we kind of dig into this topic, I want you to really think about the fact that sometimes you can give exactly the same amount or do exactly the same thing, but you can do it in a way that financially impacts you in a much more positive manner. And I don't want to take away from your giving or how you give, but we want to help you structure it in a way that really maximizes your dollars. Because if giving is limited by your actual dollars and we can save you tax money, you might be able to actually give more. And that's really the exciting piece sometimes for a lot of people is they're like, wow, I can really do that? That's incredible. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dan. Dan, you want to open us up?
Yeah, well, I just want to hit on that point. You made reference to the giving of America as a whole. Our tax code is actually built in a way, it's not always favorable for us, but there are ways to make it favorable for those that are charitably minded. And I think that's really important to understand that. And it's not a selfish pursuit either. It'll leave you in a position to potentially give more down the road and be a better giver for those organizations you want to benefit. But the simple question is, and kind of the premise for the topic was, does donating to charity reduce my taxes? Very simple question, right? Straightforward, you would think. And the answer to it is yes, very likely the case, but it's not quite so simple as, well, if I donate X, I get to write off X or reduce my income by that same amount. It's not exactly how it works. There's a couple of conditions there that need to be met, and you really need to do it right to make sure that you're being as efficient as possible, both from your own ledger perspective, but for the charities you're choosing to benefit as well. And one thing that, to take note of right off the top, you cannot reduce your income by any more than a 20 to 60% maximum based upon the size of the gift that you give, right? So there's no condition where you'll be able to make a donation so large that all of your income vanishes for that tax year. That's just not going to be the case. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the charities that you choose, they need to be qualified. In the simple terminology around that, or terminology that we talk about, and you'll see it advertised a lot, for organizations that meet the definition, but it's a 501c3 is the code, 501c3. Those organizations are considered exempt by the IRS, so donations you make to them are going to be deductible for you. Now, that's not something that is, always so easy to come by. So a little word of advice there is, if you're unsure, simply ask. It's a fair question. It's not insulting. It's nothing that's going to, set anybody off guard who's asking for your hard-earned money. If they are, they will tell you, right? So that's a really simple point to make sure that you're on top of. And then the valuation of the gift. I know you're driving around, listening to the radio, there's commercials all the time about how you can donate your car, donate your boat, donate your truck, any vehicle out there, donate your home, give us land. There's all these things that they're encouraging you to give away. But those things aren't just a check, right? A check's easy to value, right? What's the number on the face of it? Everyone understands that. But when it starts coming into the property realm, there are things you need to do to make sure that you're properly being credited for the gift you've given.
Yeah, no, those are all really good good points, Dan. And I think when you talk about the 501c3, just the nonprofit status of an organization, there's nothing unusual about that conversation. And I think if anyone starts getting sketchy on that, you should instantly run away. Like, even if there's a hesitation, are you a nonprofit? Yes. Are you a 501c3? Oh, absolutely. There would be no hesitation like, well, we don't actually disclose that. That doesn't exist. And, I think that's really important for a lot of people to understand, because if anyone gets a little iffy, you should be able to look them up. They should be able to provide their 501c3 status. They should be filing public reports. There's all sorts of different documentation that they can provide, prove, whatever. And, a really healthy 501c3 nonprofit organization will publicize their financials. They'll publicize, how well they're doing, how poorly they're doing, how their donations are coming in. So if you're afraid you're giving to an organization that's just falling apart, you should be able to find that out. And that's something that I, look for pretty personally when I'm actually thinking about charities and getting involved, is to make sure my money's not funding one individual person that's, running it by themselves. That's because there are people out there that can start their own 501c3 and you're just giving to them. And, are they really accomplishing whatever mission or goal that you're hoping that to be? I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, that's, we're going to get into it in the kind of the mistakes section of this conversation. That's going to come up a little later on. But you hit that point, Ben, and I want to make sure we reinforce it. Just because you're giving to a charity that has a cause that you believe in doesn't mean that they're being good stewards with your money. That's a separate question, right? So you don't want to necessarily, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I personally wouldn't want to make a donation to a charity that, I'm paying for luxuries of the employees and certain things that are really just taking away from the purchasing power I think I'm handing to them to support the actual cause that we believe in. So that's an important thing. But, when it comes to the items that you can donate beyond the realm of simple cash and just monetary donations, one important thing to keep in mind on is appreciated stock. All right, this is a very interesting type of an opportunity for people, that if you have a stock portfolio and a portfolio of investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc., and you have a position there that is significantly appreciated. So there's a gain in there, a large gain that you've not realized because you've yet to sell, and you're interested separately to making a donation to an organization of your choosing. You don't sell the stock and give them the money. Don't do that. Just give them the stock.
That is probably one of the lost arts of really giving. And for a lot of nonprofits, they're not prepared to receive stock, Dan, right? I mean, I have dealt with this over and over again. It's like, you have somebody who wants to give you $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. Well, they've already decided to do that. Ask them if they want to donate appreciated stock so they don't have to pay the taxes on that gain. It's the same dollar amount. Because some people say, well, why would I want to donate stock? I made all this money in it. You can keep the money in the bank and not donate that to them and just give them the stock. It's the same dollar amount and you paid less in taxes. Really, the focus of this is that if you're working with a nonprofit that doesn't have the ability or knowledge or know how to do that, they can give us a call. I mean, we can walk them through it. There's a lot of easy ways to do this. It's not complicated. And you can reach us at 855-226-8551, not from a solicitation perspective, but we want people to give the best they possibly can give. And we can help people resolve that and work with them. And they don't have to do it through us. We'll just give you the information. But it's definitely the better way of donating is that scenario. And also, Dan, you mentioned cars and boats. I don't know if you're a nonprofit needing a boat, that's interesting. Maybe that is. Maybe you're, working on some river up, in the Uganda or something. I have no idea. But anyways, there are reasons to donate all these vehicles, but you might have a vehicle that's really worth $5,000, but you can't sell it. And the truth is it appraises for $5,000 and so forth, but you just cannot sell it at this point in time. You can donate it and get the value of that donation for the value of that vehicle. So if you really can't sell it because of some other reason, like no one wants to buy a scooter in the middle of winter and in New England, then but you could donate it for what it's worth. Well, then that's a better move for you. And so people take advantage of that. I mean, my wife and I've chatted about it. Just even donating to Goodwill, like clothing and stuff like that, because she used to separate some of it out and go sell it at some of these stores, and that's wonderful, and we get a little bit of money back, which I value. But then I walked through her, and then they would reject 2/3 of the clothes. And I was like, if you donate 100% of the clothes to Goodwill, tax deduction alone almost equals what you got for, 20% of the clothes you actually sold, and you still went to Goodwill. So sometimes donating stuff is actually better, and people don't do the math on that. So it's kind of important. If you're in a 20% bracket and you donate something for $100, well, you're going to get $100. You're going to get $20 back off your taxes. But if you sold it and you got $20 for it, isn't that the same money? And maybe you help somebody out. It's things to think about. It's worth considering, especially if you itemize. And that's where we get to next. Because honestly, if you don't itemize, then some of the donation stuff doesn't even get credited. And that's the hard truth. Right, Dan?
Yeah. No, up and until this year, for the last several since the pandemic, there was an exemption in the tax code where you could make a claim for a charitable gift up to $600 without itemizing. So for those of you who've potentially gotten used to doing that over the last several years, that rule is going away. So for this year, you will not be able to do that. That was $300 for an individual, $600 for joint filers. But now this year, beginning again, if you're looking to make a claim and get a deduction based upon a gift you've provided, you will need to itemize. And the standard deduction for 22 is going to be $12,950 per individual, or $25,900 for a family or a married couple filing jointly. So with those numbers in mind, if you're looking to, if you have the ability to potentially itemize and exceed that through all of your deductions, including the charitable gift, if you want to take advantage of that gift, you're going to have to itemize. So that's an important thing to take note of this year as you kind of get ready for year end and potentially doing the math around, how can I maximize this and get a gift in before the close of the tax year?
Yeah, and Dan, you mentioned 22, which everyone's really familiar with because we finished 22 taxes here, or you're actually finishing them right now. And you've got 23 taxes. Your standard, filing jointly deduction is $27,700. And the whole thing about that is, if you have no deductions whatsoever at all, the government gives you $27,700 to deduct. That is the deduction. If you then say, I'm going to give $10,000 to charity, and that's your only other itemized item, and that's the only single thing, it's $10,000, and you're married filing jointly, you're still only going to deduct $27,700. So a lot of people don't realize that you have to go over that itemized deduction process to really, really drive the ability to deduct. And that's the big question. You're listening to Money on Tap. We're going to be right back. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about how itemization is the key to your tax filing.
Hey everyone, Dan Mickelon here with Brayshaw Financial. Looking for a hassle-free way to invest? Look no further than Brayshaw Financial Group. With Brayshaw Financial Group, you can start investing with as little as $100, enjoy a user-friendly platform with a diverse range of investment options. Visit Brayshaw Financial Group and start your investment journey today. Brayshaw Financial Group, investing made easy.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Mickelon. We're all planners and partners at Brayshaw Financial Group. Seth is out this week, but he will be back next. We miss him dearly. Don't tell him we said that, though. Don't want him to get a big head. We are talking about giving your best and being the best giver you possibly can. And I think, the theme of our show today is kind of going through all the parts and pieces of how to do charitable giving well and how to maximize that. And, because everyone gives, this is a show for everyone. And I think how you give is in all sorts of forms and fashions. And how does that impact your taxes? We just left off talking about standardized deductions and how currently, if you're married filing jointly, you automatically get a $27,700 deduction. It doesn't matter if you have anything to itemize whatsoever at all. You get $27,700 to write off. As I mentioned, if you do a $10,000 donation to the church or a local charity or, some organization that you support that's a 501c3, well, your deduction is still going to be $27,700, which is the standardized number everyone gets. And you have to go over that number and to itemize and to get more than that number, where they use the higher of the two. So think of it as, two, pots of water where, the government has already filled your pot with $27,700, and you have a separate pot where you can put all the deductions you add up for over the course of the year. So maybe you have $10,000 going to the church, and you got, $5,000 in health, and you got this, and you got that, and you start, whatever. You've got a small business, and you're writing off, your home office and your, ink cartridges and your, various, cars and vehicles or whatever. And all of a sudden that number is $35,000. Well, when you're filing your taxes, they look at what your number is and then what the government's number is. And if your number is higher, you get to deduct that. And that's called itemizing your deductions. Then therefore forego this standardized deduction. Well, some people, some years will itemize because they go over, and maybe that's 30,000 compared to the government's 27, and the next year they're under, they're 25. And so there's this kind of bouncing back and forth. There's ways of kind of triggering itemization some years and then just using the government's. And so what we've done with a lot of people, and probably one of the cleverest, simplest ways to maximize just the standardized deductions to really amplify your value, is to do what we call a donor advised fund. I mean, it's simple. It's for everybody. There's major organizations offer it everywhere. We have the ability to do those for you. But you basically say, I'm going to give $30,000 to the church or $50,000 to the church over the next 3 to 5 years, $10,000 a year. Well, you can put all that money in a donor advised fund and get the deduction today as a write-off, as your, itemized deduction piece, along with all your other stuff, and push your itemization way up, way over the $27,700. If you're given $50,000 over the next 5 years and you put it in a donor advised fund, well, that's going to be just $50,000 alone in itself in your itemization space. And that beats the $27,700. And you accomplish that all in 1 year. So you get this massive deduction where if you just gave $10,000 each year for the next 5 years, well, you're just going to get the $27,700. So in year one, by doing a donor advised fund, you get $50,000 this year. And every year thereafter, you get $27,700. Where if you don't do a donor advised fund, you get $27,700 all those years for 5 years, which sounds great, right? But you're off $23,000 or $22,300 of deductions that you could have gotten by doing a donor advised fund. And for some people, you can really maximize a year where your income was just a little bit higher and you really want to kind of bring that down. A super great way of maximizing your taxes and not changing your giving, but kind of front loading your giving. And you're not giving it all to the charity at once. You can space it out as often as every month or once a year, or you can give it all 5 years from now, but you get the credit today. And that's really where it matters. That's really where we're focused on, is trying to mitigate taxes in any one particular year where maybe you have a much higher income year, or you sold a property, or you did this, or you did that, and you're saying, I don't want to pay as many taxes. What can I do? This is a simple way of kind of front loading your write-offs and getting yourself to a position where you might be in a better space. But that brings us to all the various types of deductions you can do. And I'm going to pass that over to Dan, and what applies and what doesn't.
Yeah, for a lot of people around here in particular, that people that I know, and we like to give our time, right? That's something that we can do with our kids, we can do as a family. It's not necessarily a monetary thing, but working at soup kitchens or helping the kind of homeless charities and things like that, where you want to bring your family out to experience this, build apathy. So that's a donation of your time. Unfortunately, the time itself is not deductible. But if you do have a cause that you want to go champion and invest yourself into, but it requires you to travel, potentially to buy a uniform to wear, when you're on the road to accomplish these things, you need to eat, you need room and board. Those expenses that come along with the activity itself, they themselves are in fact deductible. So you want to keep your receipts for that. So any expense you take on while you're spending your time on behalf of the charity, you want to make sure you note those costs. Make sure you grab those receipts, you keep that filed, because if you do have that opportunity to itemize, you want to be able to ensure that you're getting properly credited for what you've done there, and that's an important note. So the time itself, not deductible. the expenses you incur to deliver your time to these organizations is deductible. So make sure you take full and good advantage of that. And when it comes to any of these kind of giving models that are anything other than physical money, writing a check or delivering stock, things that are very easily valued, it's important that you understand the process around how to properly be credited for that. So any item that you would donate that's in excess of value of $5,000 that you're looking to take a deduction on, you're going to need to get it independently appraised. All right, so there's a little expense in that, some effort involved in that. But if you want to maximize that gift, it's worthwhile. But there are certain publications, certain forms that the IRS will require you to include with your deduction forms, and it's a Form 8283, in fact, for any donation of property in excess of $5,000. Again, in excess of $5,000, you will be required to get an appraisal so that you're properly credited for that.
I like the fact that you brought that up, Dan. I mean, that is a missed art, especially when it comes to the vehicles and the boats, Dan, that we're donating to charities these days. But that is important for you to know that, because you can't just kind of make up numbers. You have to really, like get values and get someone to sign off on it that it's worth that much and so forth. So that's important. So I want to jump into, we talked about donor advised funds are kind of bunching your giving up front. We talked about donating, appreciated assets, like a stock that's appreciated, in significant value versus just donating cash just to avoid the capital gains tax. And now we're going to talk about QCDs, qualified charitable distributions. Now, this is for our listeners who are on the older space, who are looking to give away a little bit of their money, but they're also trying to figure out how to mitigate taxes. And probably one of the most, I would say, separate from the first two we talked about, Dan, this is number 3. And if you're not listening, be prepared to sign up and subscribe to our podcast. We appreciate that anyways, but replay this, because if you're not sure, give us a call. That's 855-226-8551. But qualified charitable distributions are probably the most overlooked financial advisor piece nationwide. And it's honestly a lot of work. It's a lot of work for us to do this, but if they're not doing it, they're not helping you. And one of the things about qualified charitable distributions is the ability to donate to a charity directly from your IRA, instead of it going to your hands and then you writing a check. And you say, well, Ben, why would you do that? Why would I just take the money out of my IRA, put it in my bank account, and then write a check to XYZ charity for $100? Well, the thing is that when you do that, that becomes part of your taxable income, and then you write it off. And guess what? That whole issue around standardized deductions comes into play. And like Dan mentioned, you don't get these specialized, charitable distribution, deductions from the government anymore. So you just get your $27,700 married filing jointly standardized deduction, whether you give $1 or $27,707. It's the same number. So if you give it directly out of your IRA, you get not to take the income in, which means you're not going to pay taxes on it. Okay, so it's kind of the same thing as it is the same thing mathematically than as a deduction. And 2, it meets your RMDs. So if you're in the RMD space and you're over that 72.5 and you have to take out RMDs, this is literally perfect. You say, hey, I want to give money to my charities. Well, instead of taking my RMDs, I'm going to give a portion directly out of my IRA to the charity. Therefore, I don't have to take the money in and take it in and pay taxes on it and then donate it. And then guess what? I don't get the deduction for it because I've already got a standardized deduction going through my system. Dan, what do you think about this? I mean, this is like, we talk to people, it's as if this is like totally not known worldwide.
Yeah, I mean, it's astonishing to say this, but we run into people all the time where RMDs are just an absolute nuisance for them, right? They don't want to get penalized, so they want to make sure that it's done, but they're not interested in taking in the income and affecting their overall tax picture. They intend to just leave their IRAs to their kids, which is not tax efficient in its own right, but it's just how things fall sometimes. So the ability to kind of rid yourself of the tax burden, make the gift that you intended to, and do it in a way that, as you mentioned, Ben, doesn't require you to run that RMD through your own ledger and offset your tax picture entirely. It's just a simple way to give that gift, do it cleanly, do it directly, and just maximize your own tax point of view for that given year.
Yeah, and if you're not understanding what we're talking about, that's okay. That's normal. That's pretty standard. I mean, we've talked to financial planners and other professionals about this, and it's kind of over their head too. But these are some of the most opportunistic ways to handle it. We have people in our office that handle taxes. We have people that understand these things. Give us a call, 855-226-8551, or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And, ask us about, bunching. Ask us about donor advised funds. Find out if donating appreciated assets is something a charity you work with or want to work with can do and help them do it. Or if you're not familiar with, QCDs or qualified charitable distributions, give us a call. Happy to walk it through for you today or any day that you want to really find the way that you can give in a piece that is not financially hampering your ability to be the best you can be as a giver.
Yeah,
these are things. You're giving money away for no reason. Go ahead, Dan.
I would just simply challenge people out there that are listening. If you are of age and are taking RMDs and you make donations to charity, just give us a call. Just let us walk you through it and make sure you're doing it right. It's as simple as that. It doesn't be an exhaustive investigation here into, review of tax forms or anything like that. It's a simple call. It's a simple conversation when we can have it in a kind of a one-on-one setting and speak more directly to you and your tax picture. But we'd be happy to take that call, give you our best advice, and just make sure you're doing that well. Our purpose in doing these shows is to make sure people are retiring and retiring well. And this is an element of that. And, being aired on Christian stations, we're obviously very much leaning towards the charitable outlook that so many of our listeners have. But we want to support that. We want to make that as efficient as possible and just do the best by everybody involved in that giving to make sure that it continues and we can do the most that we possibly can.
Well said, Dan. Well said. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Don't go anywhere. We're going to come right back and close out this show with the biggest mistakes that givers make to help you beware of falling into those pitfalls. Be right back.
Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Look no further than Brayshaw Financial Group. Our team of experienced advisors is dedicated to helping beginners like you build wealth through smart investing strategies. Visit BrayshawFinancial.com today to start your journey toward financial independence. Brayshaw Financial Group, your partner in wealth creation.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Miquelon. Seth's out today. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're going to close out the show. We want to talk to you about some of the biggest mistakes that givers make, and it's just not worth doing it. So I hope you've held on. If you have, you're listening to us right now. And Dan, I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah, and this is the first one is one that we hit on the kind of previous segments here is make sure you check the credentials of the organization, right? So not every nonprofit is a 501c3. Two different things, a lot of overlap there, no doubt, but it's a valid question. And to Ben's point earlier, if they're shying away from giving you a quick, absolute 100% solid response to that, big red flag, big red flag. So just check the credentials in any organization you choose to benefit. Number two is aligning your giving with your personal goals, right? There's a lot of worthwhile causes out there. There's lots of commercials you'll see, solicitations you'll get through all kinds of social media or even face-to-face. You don't need to contribute to everything. Choose the causes that are near and dear to your own heart and your own belief system, and choose to benefit those charities first would be my words of advice on that anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if you don't align your giving with your goals, your heart, you're never really going to be satisfied with what the organization's doing. That's one of the pieces that I kind of share with people that are looking for organizations to give. We won't tell you whether we think you should give to this or that or anywhere, but I will tell everybody, make sure your heart and your giving are in line, because that is literally the clearest way for you to really make sure that your funds are moving in the right direction for you. But waiting till the end of the year to donate is not always good either. One of the things that people do is they wait till the last minute, Dan, like in December, a lot of people do a lot of selling in stock just to, clear out capital gains and do, tax loss harvesting and so forth. And they're just cycling stocks. And sometimes the market really, really goes south in December. Then you're saying, well, I want to give, but I just lost all this money in the stock. And you didn't know enough to sell, to donate appreciated stock or whatever the story is. People wait to the end of the year, and it's really just not the most opportune time to give. Organizations need the money year round. And honestly, giving during the course of the year is significantly healthier. Usually cleaning up your giving at the end of the year is, hey, I want to itemize. I'm going to give a little extra this year, and I'm not going to give next year. And then we talk about donor advised funds, and that's that piece.
And failing to check on operating expense ratios, this is an absolutely huge one. Any of these reputable charities will be able to provide you information in writing, whatever form you want to receive it in, that will literally pinpoint how much of the money that they take in actually goes to the cause that they're looking to champion, and how much of it is gobbled up in administrative expenses. And this is just a hugely important one. Some of these organizations, may start out well-intended, but they get absolutely bloated, and they take on all this additional extra cost just to administrate themselves. And that really diminishes the end goal. So be mindful of that. Keep your eyes open for that. That's another very fair question to ask.
One thing, Dan, to add to that too, and because people are like, well, what does that mean? And it's like, if an organization is, taking more than 10% of your charity gift and putting it in their pocket and not going directly to the cause that you're supporting, more than 10% is a big question mark. You should be really saying, is this really a relevant scenario? Like, are they taking more because the costs really do justify that? Or is it an inflated expense ratio for the organization and they're not well run?
Responding emotionally to emotional pleas. That's that one where, you see these absolutely gut-wrenching infomercials and all these causes that are out there, and every one of them is valid. Every one of them is worthy of getting behind and easing suffering someplace on this planet. But, don't react to everything you see. There are causes, there are things that are close to our heart, every day of every year, all the time. That's where you want to focus. Don't necessarily get pulled away from your core cause because you just saw something that struck an emotional chord.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the dog videos with, Sarah. Was it Sarah McLachlan? Often, whatever. They do. They pull on your heartstrings. You're like, but that's not where my heart really goes. But you're like, I feel bad for those dogs. Those are things that are real items and so forth. So yeah, they want to toy with your heart, and they make you feel like you're not doing enough. And that's one thing. But then you struggle with the issue, which runs right into, spreading your generosity too thin. Like, you're giving to everybody. You're giving $5 here and $10 here and $20 there, and guess what? You do a $10,000 charitable gifts of $100 each. Well, that adds up pretty quick. But then all of a sudden, you're potentially dealing with an audit, because unless it's more than $250, they're not sending you a receipt, and now you have to prove all those things. And honestly, people who make lots of little donations and they add up to huge dollars, there's big red flags in that for an IRS audit, and that's something to really be careful of.
And there's donating to receive a prize or a gift. If the cause really means something to you, you don't need that incentive. I don't know where else to go on that. It's nice that there's potentially some give back, and everybody likes to get entered into a raffle and potentially win something, but that's not the reason you're making the gift. Focus on your beliefs, focus on why you're there, and let that guide you. Don't be swayed because there's this potential payoff in the end that's just, irrelevant. There's one more, is the failing to hit on the appreciated stock issue. I think we've hit that a number of different times, but I think that is one of the truly best opportunities that you can have to make a gift. And as year end's coming up here, take a look at that portfolio. You had gifting in mind, you had a dollar amount in mind. Give us a call. Let us show you a better way to do it potentially.
Sorry about that, Dan. Yeah, that's going to do it for us at Money Untapped this week. Be successful in your investing. Be the best giver you can be. This is your opportunity to be different. And, taking this, seriously and really doing this in a way that maximizes every dollar is really what's important. And there's so many ways, and this is just a drop in the bucket of what's available to you. Thank you for listening this week. You can reach us at 855-226-8551, or you can email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And feel free to subscribe. Tell your friends about our show. We really appreciate the value we can potentially bring to people as they kind of go through the struggles of being the best they can be and be successful in your investing this week. We'll see you next week. Take care.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.
Well, bye.